I've been making mod reviews now for a few months, and I've had a lot of mod creators approach me over these few months. Now, generally speaking, I won't review mods if I'm asked to. I like to have the freedom of choice, and I like to be able to pick mods that are fresh and new, and are something that you might not experience in Rimworld. But there will be one exception to this rule. Today's mod creator was the very first mod creator to recognize me, recognize my mod reviews, and they were the first to ask me to review one of their mods. Now, this mod creator is called Calmdall. He's a fantastic bloke. He's very active within the community, and he's created two mods, and I've had the pleasure of choosing one of them for today's mod review. And today's mod that I've chosen is Kami's Factions: A New World. Yes, I have been asked to review this mod, and I will say this right at the very beginning. It's not sponsored, but I was asked. I will be brutally honest throughout this review because I only think that's the best thing for it. Now let's get into things and start with the content. So let's start by looking at the content of the Steam Workshop page. What is there and what do we see? So we have the initial thumbnail here, no other pictures unfortunately. I would maybe quite like a couple more images in game at the beginning here, and then we get into the bulk of the Steam Workshop page. This is really good. We have vivid descriptions, we have pictures, we have GIFs, we have the lot. There's literally no way we can potentially improve this. I could see the argument for having the individual genes of all the new xenotypes added, but that would be a hell of a lot to add. This is pretty much perfection when it comes to a Steam Workshop page. Now, before we look actually in-game at what these brand new xenotypes look like, what I want to start off with is by looking at how these work within the factions that have been created. We have three new factions that have been added with this mod: the New World Industry faction, the New World Pirates faction, and the New World Space Fleet. These three factions have their unique xenotypes added to them and can spawn naturally in-game. And what I wanted to show to you guys was that these come naturally defaulted as being added to your playthroughs. And then what I wanted to show to you was the percentage spawn rate for the different xenotypes. And as you can see, for each one, it's 100%. There's an equal spawn rate of every single new xenotype. Now, this is very important, and I want you to bear that in mind for the rest of this review, that every single xenotype that's been added by this mod within each faction has an equal spawn rate from what I can tell. Therefore, everything should be perfectly balanced, shouldn't it? So in-game, we have access to 15 brand new xenotypes. These look extremely vanilla and as if they fit in. This is thanks to the framework that's been created by Red Mathis and with the big and small genes, and alpha genes from Sarge Bjornsson and Calmdall's own new gene mod as well. So let's start by looking at the xenotypes part of the New World Pirates faction. Now, this is an industrial faction that starts off at being hostile with the player, but you can obviously become friends with them if you give them enough nice, pretty gifts. So let's start by looking at the Malice xenotype. This big blue unit is like a Smurf on steroids. An absolute melee combat powerhouse, balanced by the fact that it cannot wear armor and it cannot use any weapons. Next, we have the Lecher, however you want to pronounce it. This is a very unique xenotype, and honestly, I think this is probably the coolest one that we've got in this mod. This is like a slug crossed with a vampire. Can never eat and relies on using blood to fuel the hemogen need. Otherwise, not much else going on with this one in my opinion. Next, we have Chaos. These little red boys are designed to be doing for your crafting and running around, grabbing materials, crafting little bits and pieces here and there. These ones are kind of working xenotypes. Next, we have the Drac. This cute little lad can do mining and art, and not much else, honestly. Lastly, of the New World Industrial faction, we have the Assimilator. This one can steal genes, implant genes, and do whatever it wants. Another really cool concept here. So next, let's move on and look at the New World Industrial faction. Once again, this starts off as hostile, but obviously we can bribe them with gifts and make them like us. These ones are a little bit more high-tech in my opinion than the New World Pirates faction, and these all pretty much have drug addictions, Wake Up and Go Juice being the main ones. So let's start by looking at the first xenotype here, the Pharmacist. The Pharmacist is a medical and intellectual specialist and has a special unique ability called Passive Regenerator, which basically makes them really good in a hospital situation. Next, the Extractor. This one in my opinion is one of the better xenotypes in this mod. Very good at mining with a high mining yield as well. Very strong. Good immunity, really good heat tolerances. This xenotype is one of the best here. Next, we have the Producer. This one, in my opinion, is a very underrated xenotype that's been added by this mod. Really good plants, really good animals. These ones are kind of just going to be constantly looking after your animals, constantly doing your planting and everything. Next, we have the Manufacturer, and it pretty much does exactly what it says on the tin. Really good at construction, really good at crafting, and has a lot of very good genetic benefits to help you with making more things, regardless of the environment and what you're making. Total anti-rot resistance, really good toxic resistance as well, so it can be constantly repairing your kill boxes no matter what's in it. Next, we have the Assaulter, and on the surface of things, these seem like absolute killing powerhouses. Strong shooting, strong melee, kill thirst, super fast healing, complete practical immunity. These ones seem really, really powerful, but they are go juice dependent, which is obviously going to be harder to obtain in the base game vanilla Rimworld, and they have a lethal cell instability. So when we do manage to recruit one of these, you're only going to be able to have them alive for a maximum of about 3 years. Next, moving on, look at the New World Spacer faction. Once again, these are also naturally hostile to us, and I mean, you can definitely bribe them with things if you want to make them like you. Generally speaking, these ones are all a little bit more niche in what they can do, and are definitely some of the most powerful xenotypes that have been added by this mod. So let's start by looking at the Machine Head. These ones are natural mechanitors that have been added by this mod, which is a really cool concept. This one I've spawned in isn't actually a mechanitor, so all the mechanitor extra genes have been grayed out, but even without those, the stats that we've got here and the genes that have been adding extra bonuses here are really, really powerful. Next, we have the Grand Xenotype. This one is a sort of social character that's going to be milling around your colony, talking to lots of people, feeding them nice yummy biscuits and asking them about their day. What I don't understand is why we have a xenotype called Gran and they have the attractive gene. This one confused me a little bit, but I mean, it depends what you're into, doesn't it, I guess. Next, we have the Starman Xenotype, and these ones are kind of like the Gran Xenotype as well, just a little bit better, not very combat focused. Once again, these ones are going to be milling around your colony, talking to people, making people feel better, and working on your research. Next, the Bulwark 2. This one kind of reminds me of the Malice Xenotype that we first looked at. This one, however, doesn't quite have as many combat genes as the Malice. However, this one can use weapons and it can use armor as well, pretty much bringing this one on par with the Malice. And then lastly, we have arguably the coolest xenotype that's been added by this mod, the Marksman 7. This one you can quite clearly see the Predator vibes going on with the Feralisk eyes. These are going to be designed for lone wolf missions where they're going to be off with the sniper rifle, running fast, shooting people down. So as you can see, the factions and the xenotypes that have been added here are really, really cool, and they almost seem very vanilla expanded-esque, and I put them on the same level of quality as that. So what I want to do is go back to what it looks like when we're trying to spawn in these factions and what xenotypes are spread across all of these. Now, very interestingly, the xenotypes added by this mod are only available to these factions, but I could definitely see the argument to see several of these added to like the Impid faction, the Empire faction. I think the mod creator here could do a really interesting upgrade to this mod by allowing these to spawn in naturally with all those other factions and not necessarily force you to play with the 3 factions they've added. So what does this all look like in game, and how are we going to necessarily get them? So what I've done is I've spawned in a raid of each of these brand new factions, and as you can see, the 100% spawn rate of every single xenotype is coming into play here. They've all kind of equally spawned out, with a couple of them missing for some reason or another. Definitely, as you can see, the Malice, it's quite big, it's quite blue, and it's very obvious to see. I think an immediate improvement to this mod will be reducing the spawn rates of some of these xenotypes, because I don't necessarily think the Malice should be spawning as high of a rate as it is. But we can see everything spawns in, it all looks good. You're kind of reminded here of like a non-toxic waster faction, you're kind of reminded of an industrial faction. And then with the Spacer faction as well, we can very much tell that there is Empire theming going on here. So that's going to be it for the content section here, and I am super impressed by this mod. If I wasn't asked to review this mod, it would still be a mod that I'd definitely be reviewing, because the faction and the xenotypes that we've got here are super unique, while still adding a very good amount of content to your different individual factions. The only criticism I've got here is that yes, they are all of equal spawn rates within the factions. I'm not too sure I agree with that, and I would definitely like to see some of these other xenotypes added to the base game vanilla factions and spread out across, so I'm not necessarily forced to always play with the 3 factions that this mod has added. It's not too big of a deal, but for me personally, I want to see them in every single faction because they are so good. Yes, some of them are better than others. Every single faction that's been added here with the xenotypes, they all feel like it's had love and care put into it. Nothing's been added here that doesn't make sense, and nothing's been added that is a waste of time. Everything is useful in their own regard, and I think that is amazing. So for content, I'm going to be giving it a 9 out of 10. So next, let's move on and look at the quality section here. And I think it's really important to say before we get into this section that all the genes that have been added to all these different xenotypes are dependent on lots of different mods. Alpha genes, red mathices, big and small genes. Everything's kind of a mishmash of lots of different mods, and because of this, nothing is necessarily super unique and nothing is necessarily super authentic. So I will be bearing that in mind, despite how good or bad all the xenotypes look. So zooming in and looking on all of our very good looking and very handsome xenotypes, they all look really, really good. They look amazing, in fact. all super unique and all something that have been added to Rimworld in a unique way. None of these look the same, and they all look pretty much like what the Xenotype would say within the gene. However, there is a few inconsistencies here and there because, like I said, these Xenotypes have been made up of lots of other different gene mods, and as a result, there is some issues with different texture qualities here and there, especially when we look at some Xenotypes like the Drac. The head is a really nice texture quality, and the rest of the body is just a bit weird. Otherwise, these Xenotypes look really good, and I love the uniqueness that comes with these, and they all just look right. They fit in perfectly with vanilla Rimworld, and I think this is a fantastic looking mod to add to your playthroughs. Now obviously I've only shown you these Xenotypes naked. I've only let you see them without any clothes on so we can see the full visual effects of these Xenotypes. So what I've done here is I've built them a little clothes shop, and we're going to let them go shopping, because who doesn't want to go shopping in Rimworld? And what we're going to do is let them go wild. I've got dusters in here, parkas, we've got hats, we've got armor, we've got everything. The idea here is that I'm going to let them dress anything they want, and then we're going to kind of see how things fit on them, whether there are any graphical issues at all, and if we can notice any differences that we need to say about. So I've given them a few minutes to dress themselves, and they've all decided to put on armor and some variations of clothes that, I mean, I've had no control of. This is what the Xenotypes want. I've had no input in this whatsoever. And going through, there are no graphical issues whatsoever. There's no clipping, there's no weird overlapping, everything works perfectly. Bearing in mind that this is all vanilla clothes, none of this has been modded or anything. The only thing that I've got a slight concern with is the Malice has obviously got no clothes on because they can't equip it, but they can wear a nice pretty crown. I've got no problems with this. Whether this is intentional or not, I don't know. Maybe we could have this as just a kind of note that yes, they can't wear any clothes, but they can still wear headgear. So that's going to be it for the quality section here, and I just want to say that this mod is sublime. The quality here is super good, and it fits in perfectly with vanilla Rimworld. So much so is that if you told me that this mod was made by the vanilla expanded team, I would believe you. Every single Xenotype here is of such a high quality that yes, even when I'm zooming in and they look a little bit off in certain places, we give them some clothes, and because they also work perfectly, you won't even see these graphical issues most of the time. Everything is of a quality that I am expecting of a Xenotype mod and a faction mod. It all makes sense. Everything fits perfectly. The only thing that I have an issue with is I want to see Calm's own work put into this, not necessarily using the stuff provided by the big and small genes, and not necessarily stuff using the alpha genes. I get why he's done it, and I fully understand why, but I want to see his own work put into this. Otherwise, quality section here, I'm going to be very comfortably giving this another 9 out of 10. Next, let's move on and look at the balancing of these Xenotypes. Now, when Calmdor released this mod and was talking on Discord, I saw him make a comment that when he was asked if this mod was balanced, he said yes, this mod was balanced to his own preferences. Now, I'm not him, and I have other preferences. So what we're going to do here is look at all the different Xenotypes and kind of look at their genes individually, see what buffs we're getting, what cons we're getting, and see how they weigh up and whether or not they're actually going to be worth adding to your playthroughs. So what I've done here is I've split each Xenotype into 3 groups. None of these are in any particular order. The group on the left is the Xenotypes that I think are underpowered and can do with a little bit of a buff. The group in the middle is the Xenotypes that I think are pretty much completely balanced, and the group on the right are the ones that I think are a little bit on the more overpowered side, and we could definitely see some reductions in certain areas. So let's start by looking at the group on the left. So let's start by looking at the Drac. Now, on the surface of things, yes, the Drac is a little cutie. However, despite having strong mining and strong art, because they have the clawed hands gene, this means they have an 80% manipulation bonus. Therefore, they actually lose out on manipulation by 20%, which is not ideal for mining or art, funnily enough. On top of all of this, with the fire obsession, they're going to have pyromania, which is not ideal if you've got one of these in the forest and they're a little bit upset. And with them being a little bit upset, we also then have the aggressive gene and the very weak melee damage gene and the delicate gene. Therefore, the social fights that this Xenotype is going to be getting into, they're going to be going down quite a lot, honestly. There's too many negatives here and too many ways that they can be going down and hurting your colony. I would maybe like to see a reduction of maybe getting rid of fire obsession, maybe getting rid of the clawed hands. There's a lot going on here and I could see this being simplified. Next, we have the Leecher, or however you want to pronounce it, Xenotype. This one is the most disappointing in my opinion. This one is the coolest by a long shot in what it can do. It's a sanguiphage slug, like, it's really cool. But the only abilities it has is drinking blood. It's got sanguiphage abilities and all it can do is drink blood. What's What's the point? I don't get it. Why can we not have just like coagulate maybe? Leeches in real life can be used in the medical profession. It's not recommended, but it's something else. Give it the coagulate ability, give it a reason to have these sanguiphage abilities. Otherwise, everything with this gene type is good. It's just a waste of a sanguiphage stuff, you know? Next, we have the Chaos Xenotype, and on the surface, once again, this one actually looks pretty okay. However, when we look into things a little bit more closely, there are some issues here and there. Yes, it has strong crafting. Once again, however, though, it has the clawed hands, reducing the manipulation, making things slightly slower. And we also then have issues when we come to looking them in social situations. We have the hyper-aggressive trait paired with the frail skin trait, paired with the unsettling appearance. In a social situation, these things are not going to be liked by anybody. And if they get into a social fight with a colonist that's a lot more powerful, these things are going down. I could definitely see these maybe having the reduction of not having frail skin, just so they stay alive and they're not going down in social fights all the time, in my opinion. And then lastly, we have Gran. I did initially have this as a sort of balanced, middling xenotype, and I thought initially that this was actually a really cool concept that could work really, really well. But I kind of looked more into the genes, and every single positive gene is outweighed by the fact that this xenotype, if it goes down, is dead. And it doesn't look good on old people. That if they go down, they're just going to suffer and not get back up. The big one here for me is the brittle bones gene. This means that once they go down, they will fracture something. This paired with the frail back, with the poor melee as well, and the nearsighted. Yes, I understand that these are pretty useless in combat, and I totally get that. But they shouldn't be going down and not being able to get back up. This is just Rimworld, and I would love to see this maybe not having brittle bones, or maybe just, I don't know, just being able to take a little bit more damage than they currently can. So next, let's look at these xenotypes that I think are generally pretty balanced. I'll very quickly go through the genes and what I think makes them balanced. So starting with the producer, like I said in the content section, these ones I think are very underrated for keeping your colony afloat. They're great in plants, they're great in animals, whilst also being robust, taking a lot of damage. These ones are going to be the unsung heroes of keeping your animals and all of your plants alive. However, because they are sterile and have mild cell instability, they're not going to be living for absolutely ages. They will get cancer at certain points, and you're not going to be able to breed absolutely loads of these, which is a great balancing factor. Next, the assaulter. This one, like I said in the content section, is an absolute fighting powerhouse. This thing is an absolute unit and should definitely be scared of. However, because of the go juice dependency, which is within base game vanilla Rimworld, is kind of hard to come across because of the neutroamine, and then because it has lethal cell instability. You're not going to be able to have one of these, train it to be the most incredible fighter as well as being incredibly smart at the same time. You're not going to be able to make the most of this colonist for very long. It'll be a temporary colonist that you have, and most of the time you'll probably get one that's nearly on the edge of death. Next, we have the manufacturer. This one, once again, it's great for the job that it does. Construction and crafting, low sleep, toxic resistance, total anti-rot lungs, but has major slow instability, so it will probably get cancer whilst you've got it, and also has slow study. So whilst it is good at these things, it's not going to be getting super good super quickly. Next, we have the Starman. These ones are kind of middle of the ground for a lot of things. Whilst on the surface, you could argue that it's slightly on the more powerful side, I don't actually think it is. The weak immunity, the slow wound healing, the frail back, and not being that much of a combat colonist means that these ones will kind of be milling around, not really doing too much. Whilst they are good at medical, and whilst they're good at social, and whilst they are also good at intellectual, there are other xenotypes here that are going to be better than them. And then lastly, the Marksman 7. Whilst there is an incredible lone wolf character that's going to be going off with a sniper rifle and picking off people from afar, that's all it's going to be doing. At close range combat, it's going to be getting absolutely obliterated. And once again, the go juice dependency means that yes, you can have one of these, but you're not necessarily going to be able to maintain very many because of how hard it can be to get go juice in base game Rimworld. So let's move on and check out these xenotypes that I think are definitely a little bit overpowered. Every single one of these next xenotypes are ones that I think need a little bit of a reduction, a little bit of nerf. So let's start off by looking at the Malice. Now, the Malice, in my opinion, is the most overpowered xenotype in this mod. Now, yes, I understand that they can't wear clothes, and yes, I understand they can't equip weapons. However, the combat prowess that these have is absolutely ridiculous. Strong melee, they have natural body armor, they are robust, they have a strong stomach, super fast wound healing, total toxic and fire immunity, super tolerant to cold and heat, They have a long elderhood. They are also unstoppable. They're just insane. They also have the numb trait as well, which means they take no pain whatsoever, as well as very strong unarmed damage. I think what we need to add to this one is some sort of dependence on a drug to keep them alive, just so we can then get negatives if we're not being able to feed them something, or just make them slightly easier to kill. As we'll show in a minute or so, these ones are just insane, especially with the current spawn rates as well. Bear in mind, every single Xenotype that we will be listing and have listed have an equal spawn rate in game. So there will be an equal opportunities for every single spawn rate to spawn as any other one, regardless of their abilities. Next, we have the Machine Head. These ones are the natural Mechanitors. These ones have extremely good buffs for if they are Mechanitors. But what I want to show is if they aren't a Mechanitor and they are still of this gene type, they have some incredibly good buffs. Most notably, they have low sleep, strong construction, strong crafting, extreme gene stabilizing, so they'll never get cancer or anything, which feels like it's just a little bit too much. Yes, they have slow wound healing. Yes, they are a weak immunity, but does it really matter when they've got all these mechanoids doing the jobs for them and they can just kind of sit in a bunker? These extra abilities that they've got is just insane. I don't think that these need to be as powerful as they are. Maybe at least remove the ferrous skin or potentially remove the strong in crafting, which I could potentially say as being a little bit unnecessary. Next, we have the Extractor, and yes, I see that the point of these is they're kind of like tall dwarfs. I get that, and they're extremely good at mining as a result, and with being pack mules as well, they can carry a lot. I think that's great. But do we honestly need the fact that these are robust and they have good cold and heat tolerance? And they're also unstoppable? They're just units. They're like absolute powerhouse units. Once again, if there wasn't an equal chance for all this to spawn as all the other Xenotypes within the faction, this wouldn't be nearly as bad. Next, we have the Pharmacist. Initially, Pharmacist was in a middling ground for me. I thought this was quite balanced. And then I looked closer at the actual medical abilities here. These ones have great medical, strong intellectual, passive regenerator, which is extremely strong in a medical scenario. They have the clean trait as well, so they don't make any mess, and they are size sensitive. And with that, they don't really have any necessary negatives, apart from being volatile, mild cell instability, and weak immunity and slow healing. I could maybe see the argument of removing strong intellectual. Like, I get the strong medical, strong intellectual together, makes sense. But in this scenario, they just seem a little bit on the more powerful side in terms of their healing ability. And then lastly, the Bulwark 2. As you remember, this is the one that I compared to basically being a Malice, but with weapons. So yes, it's not quite as good as the Malice and has a lot more negatives, but it's still extremely powerful in a combat situation. I could definitely see the argument for this one having lethal cell instability as well, or maybe just reducing the amount of damage it can take. Maybe get rid of the plasteel skin or reduced pain, but maybe just give them a little bit of reduction, especially as at the moment they are very comparable to Malices, just with even more armor and weaponry. So I think the three groups of Xenotypes I've separated them into, underpowered, balanced, and slightly on the more overpowered side, I think is very fair. And what I said in that section was the Malice was the most powerful Xenotype in this mod. And what I wanted to show here is what happens when we spawn one of the factions in-game that have the Malice in it. And what happens is just just death. So many people die, and the Malices just don't take any damage at all. They are walking tanks. And when we bear in mind that these have an equal spawn rate to literally everything, and we can just get these in huge quantities, it's not really that fair. They just mow through colonists and colonies so quickly. We need to see the Malices reduced in how strong they are, or just have like a 0.5% spawn rate. So that's going to be it for the balancing here, and I think the balancing that's been done here is really good. It's really well thought of, and we've got all positives and negatives for each Xenotypes. Yes, there are a few exceptions here and there as to why I think one's more powerful than the other, and why one's weaker than the other. But generally speaking, everything is extremely well balanced. But we have to bear in mind, everything has an equal spawn rate in terms of raids. So you can have 100 Malices or 100 Dracs, or we can have 100 Chaoses and 100 Bulwark 2s. things could go completely different ways depending on what the spawn rates are going to be. And I think arguably if we can just see some changes in the spawn rate system, so we can maybe have lower spawn rates for the more overpowered ones and the more combat focused, and maybe a slightly higher increased spawn rates for the more sort of worker xenotypes, this would just completely balance itself out and I wouldn't have an issue with it. So I think my balancing score here is at this current moment in time going to be a 7 out of 10. So next let's check out the compatibility. Are there any bugs I need to let you know about and how this fits in with your playthroughs? Now in terms of bugs, looking at the Steam Workshop page, because this mod is so new and fresh, nobody has reported any bugs whatsoever. Me personally, I had no issues. Everything worked as expected, and there were no problems that I encountered. Now in terms of compatibility, this mod has been designed to be played in the Industrial and Spacer faction, as we can very obviously tell by the New World Pirate faction, New World Industrial faction, and the New World Spacer fleet. Funnily enough, this mod doesn't fit in with the medieval era nor the tribal era, but Condor has made a variation of this mod that does fit in with that. And I think the way it fits in with the Industrial and the Spacer era is perfect. Like I said, this is a perfect mod that I think enhances your vanilla experience in such a way that you would almost have no idea that this is modded. It has done an incredible job at interfacing this with Rimworld. I could definitely see arguments to say that this mod could fit in with the medieval, however, for certain reasons. And in terms of compatibility, I'm very comfortable giving this an 8 out of 10. Only being marked down because it doesn't work with the medieval era, nor does it work with the tribal era. So next let's move on and look at my mod recommendations to go with this mod. Now because this is a faction mod and xenotype mod, the list is pretty much endless for what works with this mod. So what I've done is pick a few select mods that I think would go really well with this, but there's obviously hundreds that you can use. So starting with Save Our Ship 2, for very obvious reasons with the Spacer Fleet faction, and I think all of this goes really well with everything that's in space. Next, we have Vanilla Weapons Expanded Coil Guns, and pretty much any Vanilla Weapons Expanded mod would fit really well. Simple Bulk Drugs, so we can make loads of drugs to keep all of our drug-specific colonists alive. Then Woolaloos, better conversion and recruitment, so we can use these xenotypes as much as we want. And then more linkables, so we can just offset the fact that some of them have clawed hands and we can actually continue crafting. Like I said, you could literally have a limitless mod pack with this mod because it fits in with everything, and that's what I love about it. Yes, it doesn't fit in with medieval mods, and yes, it doesn't fit in with some tribal mods, but it fits in with Rimworld, and that is what is key here. So for my mod recommendation score, I'm very comfortable at giving this a 9 out of 10. So lastly, my conclusion. Where am I at with this? This mod is amazing. Arguably, it's one of the best faction / xenotype mods I've ever reviewed. Not only because what the xenotypes that have been added are deep and they have got all unique features, but because the factions all make sense and the xenotypes fit within the factions, which is amazing. The only thing that's letting this mod down is the fact that every single xenotype has an equal spawn rate, which is letting it down in terms of the content and the actual balancing of the mod itself. Every other reason why I've marked this down is pretty much unfixable at this current stage, so it is as perfect as it gets in terms of my scoring for a mod like this. So for content, I gave it 9 out of 10, quality 9 out of 10, balancing 7 out of 10, compatibility 8 out of 10. My mod recommendation score is 9 out of 10, giving it the grand total score of 42 out of 50, which is a low rated A mod. And I think that fits this mod at its current state really well. I don't understand why more people aren't using this mod and then why more people aren't talking about this. This mod is incredible, and I highly suggest all of you guys check this out. Now obviously Comdal did ask me to review this mod, but I was more than happy to be honest, and I'm more than happy to absolutely rip into him if it was bad, and it's not. There's not too much I can rip into him about because this mod is so good in its current state, and it will be a mod that I will be using in future playthroughs. But don't listen to my opinions, formulate your own opinions and check out this mod for yourself, and I highly recommend that you do because this mod is amazing and the xenotypes that are added by it are incredible. So if you have enjoyed today's mod review, consider liking, subscribing, make sure you tell your mum about me, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.